So, what do we mean by proactive incident management and why it's important? Let me start with a risk. When we talk about risk, so risk in modern IT comes with a complexity. If you compare your data center 10 years ago and now, you might have 50 physical servers per one administrator, and that's a very, very high good ratio at the times. And that's pretty much it. When virtualization came in, now suddenly on these 50 servers might have become 100 physical servers, and every server is hosting at least 10, if not more, virtual guests. And now containers are coming. We talk about microservices. You can apply another ratio of 10 to 20. So that's how many just endpoints from this perspective are now exposed to administrators, right? So when we now look on, especially like microservices, it's all component-driven, where you have a multiple different components talking to each other. So in modern IT, it's more and more that you have a lot of moving pieces, real-time communicating to each other, and the problem in one component might be visible somewhere else. So that complexity basically brings a lot of challenges in terms of how do I stay ahead of problems, and how do I really understand what is causing problem, because quite often the places where you see the problem is not the places where problem has been originating. And that's a kind of a different points with the numbers to research, which basically try to quantify impact or economical impact of a complexity on our customers. So what is Red Hat Insight? So it's about predicting risk. It's about getting guidance and staying secure. So it's a one of implementation of emerging trend in IT, which talks about predictive IT analytics. It's about being able to spot the problems before they hit you. Even if you are in IT operations, how many truly unique problems you see in your IT environments? Most of them are not really unique. You might see the same problem in different places, right? So there is a potential with enough intelligence or with enough insights to reduce amount of incidents which you might be facing. And so it's basically predicting risks, getting guidance, and also getting a remediation. So if we know what your problem might be, we warn you, we also can give you a solution. So instead of you trying to understand what is now my remediation strategy or workaround in that particular case, we actually pretty much always know what to do, and in most of cases we even would give you playbooks or Ansible playbooks which basically help you to solve that problem. So the mission of Red Hat Insights is assessing your Red Hat Enterprise Linux environment and to proactively identify and remediate threats and help you to avoid outage and help you to reduce that risk in IT environment. So there is a quite interesting statistics which we have inside Red Hat. We looked on a severity 1 cases. So severity 1 cases which we see, it's a business impact, it's a downtime, it's basically highest severity which incident can have with us. 65% of severity 1 cases haven't been a unique. It means we might have seen that problem at a different customer before, right? So now I'm gonna talk about what we doing in order to ensure that with help of our support, what we are really trying to do, we are trying to reduce that amount of duplicate cases. So whenever we see the new issue appearing, if we are really good and we have been able properly capture it, the probability that it will catch another customer by surprise becomes relatively low. So good news is this is the core of what we call now Red Hat Enterprise Linux being intelligent operating system, because we are making inside of a part of Red Hat Enterprise Linux subscription. So if you have RHEL subscription, now part of its subscription also comes with insights. So which makes now Red Hat Enterprise Linux also proactive and tries to help you to stay ahead of problems which you might have inside your environment. So in other words, what is a typical incident management process? First, you need to be aware that you have a problem. Quite often customers have a problem. They are not really sure from where it comes. Problem might also have a sporadic kind of a nature, and it might also kind of miss that checks which you might have inside your monitoring infrastructure. So first you need to realize I have a problem. You need to analyze to understand what is really causing it. When you know what is really causing it, you need to understand what's your remediation strategy. You need to put inside your basically inside your monitoring system if you know that problem likely to occur somewhere else, and when these checks need to be supported. So what Insight is doing, it does it for you. So whenever we see the new issues, we put that into Insight infrastructure. Insight's agents are running on your Red Hat Enterprise Linux systems if you enable them. They were gonna collect enough metadata, share with us. That metadata will get analyzed against set of so-called rules inside the Red Hat infrastructure. We will identify the cases. So at this moment, we have much more than 600 rules. So 600 different type of non-unique incidents, which we've seen already at our customers. If your system has basically rule which is matching it, we will look on what is it exactly. Example, let's say you got Apache installed, and Apache has now some security problem, CVE. It's one thing if Apache is running. Another thing is your Apache is running in DMZ, or third thing that Apache is installed but not really enabled. So we're also trying to take that into consideration, and you will see later. So we try to prioritize the issues which we find, and then provide you with the remediation playbooks, mostly based on Ansible, which you basically can look, okay, this is my problems. For that particular problem, that's an Ansible playbook which you can look in. Plus, there is usually a link to the customer portal which explains exactly what problem is and how to solve it yourself. So, what Red Hat Insights are: assesses your environment, gives you a remediation script, and that basically Insights, it's set of rules which are constantly get extended by our support team. So our support team looks on any new problem which we see, tries to assess likability of this appearing somewhere else, and if it is, then the goal is to put into that Insight database. So over the time, and the more customers use it, the value of Insights is really continues to increasing. I would argue that at this point, it basically has potential to reduce that amount of incidents if we would take that 65% statistic which I shared before. So imagine if you could reduce amount of incidents by 65% when we talk about RHEL. And what kind of issues we are talking about? We are talking about availability, performance, stability, and security. Basically anything in these 4 areas. That's what we kind of focus with Insights. So this is kind of a high level, let's say, overview of how it works, right? So you got anonymized host we get anonymized host information from a system. It basically runs through analytic engine, which is combination of quite advanced technologies, including artificial intelligence and big data. Is basically matched against the rules database. And if there is a match, when we also have a part of engine which is called the playbook generator, it looks on an issue and creates a remediation playbook for you, plus a description which your IT operations team can use. And when this becomes either available to the end user through cloud.redhat.com, so it's a new service which we launched at Summit, or it's, if you've been using a satellite user, then also visible through satellite user interface. So that's an example of 3 different incidents caught by Insight. So what's interesting to see here? You see impact. What is the impact? It says if this issue would hit you, remember it's a predictive. We are trying to get ahead of a problem hitting you, right? So if this issue would really hit that system, impact would be from low to high, right? So you basically see that bar. Now, and this is a likelihood. Remember when I was talking about CV with Apache, which is not enabled? Likelihood in that case would be really, really low. If Apache is enabled and in DMZ, impact likelihood will be very, very high. And then these 2 parameters define a total risk. So when you or your IT operations look on that Insights console, they can pay attention to the total risk. Everything which has a high total risk, this is where you need to focus first. There might be things which is like impact is super high, likelihood is super low, total risk is super low. It's really up to you to look on the next window of maintenance or whatever else to identify what's the right point to fix it. But if total risk is really high, you need to really look on how quickly I can implement the change. And you see risk of a change. This is another interesting parameter. So remember, we give you remediation scripts or remediation playbooks. And this tells, like, if you apply that playbook or you do that remediation step, what is the likelihood that it will cause some disruption somewhere else? You see, risk of change is very low. So basically it says you can just apply remediation script probability that it's gonna have a negative effect of this change is very low. While here, like, you see that risk of a change is relatively like moderate. Yeah? So it basically combination of a total risk and risk of change becomes very, very interesting. So everything where you see relatively high total risk and low risk of change, you should look on, maybe I just do it right away. All right, so insights are not only about security, and that basically shows you really, really well. So it's really about big part, it's about having services available, it's about stability, security, and then performance. So don't look on insights, it's just basically mapping CVs which we release to your environment. And basically at the moment of this slide, it was 600 rules. That database is very quickly growing, so I wouldn't be surprised if this number is now much higher. And that's kind of another few typical examples of what Insight would code for you, right? Let's say you have a 1 gigabit network port which running at 10 or 100 megabit. So you can implement that check yourself, but this is also what Insights are checking for you. Like I showed you the security risk before. That's an example of basically case with OpenShift. Insights have detected that you are running OpenShift node on a RHEL, and there is not enough CPU or memory available, so it's gonna warn you that you're kind of on an edge. You might see sporadic changes. Or like check with a file system being almost fully filled. Now what you see the OpenShift. OpenShift is not part of RHEL, right? So another interesting fact about Insights. So we really look not only purely on operating system, but we are also trying to understand what is running on top and what are the best practices or things to watch for that particular workload. And in this case, it's about satellite. So when you run satellite on top of RHEL system, where we have Insights enabled, Insights will check operating system configuration against best practices here. And like if any of these things is not really properly implemented, it will warn you to say, okay, you're running satellite and yeah, whatever. Passenger performance rule, which might be configuration of your workload or operating system, is not really matching best practice. It will say warning, and will, if possible, will give you Ansible playbook or give you instructions on how to solve it. And we are not only talking about our products or application which are running on top of RHEL, we also talk about SAP. So if you run SAP on top of RHEL, we actually have built into Insights set of best practices on what SAP recommends as a baseline operating system configuration for SAP workloads. If there is any deviation, you will know. The same thing goes for Oracle SQL Server, and there is a basically constantly growing list of a wide industry used workloads which we are trying to integrate with Insights. So this is a customer which I know, which we cannot unfortunately name, but there was a quite interesting issue. So customer rack environment was facing a sporadic availability problem, and their networking and the storage team have been trying to nail that thing down for 6 months. They just enabled Insights inside their test environment, and it like a day later they got they got information through Insights on 10 incidents. One of them exactly was one which they have been hunting. So at that point, Insights have been a separate paid offering. So they bought Insights for all their infrastructure, which was like almost $1 million size deal just because of Insights. So it's a kind of a power rate. Another one is an example with being up to date and associated risk. So another customer who thought they have a really good kind of mechanism for managing risk specifically to security. And after enabling Insights, they have identified the 400 servers where actually they have been quite high risk in terms of security. So it's the beauty of the Insights, you don't really have to think about implementing your own checks. You just enable them, and your infrastructure will be constantly assessed against best practices of how to configure a system. Okay. So, like how you enable Insights? You just say, you install Insights clients unless it's RHEL 8. RHEL 8, if you use our defaults, it's a pre-installed. You use register, and then basically that's it. If you want to learn more about how to basically automatically enable it, there is a link. This is how Insights dashboard looks like when you use a cloud redhat.com. You see here one critical system affecting critical incident affecting 10 systems, 8 for 45s, which are like kind of high, and 30 medium. You see what kind of challenges are. Remember, availability, stability, performance, and security. You have rules here. What is interesting about rules, there are few cases where there might be rule hit, but you have made this configuration on purpose. It might go against particular rule. You are able to disable particular rule against set of a system. So for that part of a system, I'm not really interested to have that check because it gives me false positives. Now, Insights, as you might have guessed, is a software as a service. Two components. One, which you enable at your system, and our part is that brain, which is Red Hat service at our premises. So what it means, your system is transferring the data at least once per day, well, not at least, by default once per day, to that Insights brain, let's say. So first of all, everything is encrypted. We use a certificate, and usually by default hostname and IP is basically anonymized. So it's not really possible to easily pinpoint things back. Your security officer might be still concerned. So we provide a list. There is a knowledge base article. If you look on Insights data, you will see one of a few first hits pointing to this. We explicitly tell you what we get. So if you've been sharing a source report is something which you share with us by default when you open a ticket. Insights contains roughly 1% of what source report contain. So meaning if you are okay sharing with us source report, it's most likely it's more than okay to share Insights with us. But for sake of transparency, we still list exactly the files and things which we examine. And let's look on var log messages. We are actually not getting complete var log messages file. We actually look for particular strings in that file and get only particular lines. And then the same thing goes for commands which we basically run. We really look for particular type of information, and that's what gets transferred. But if your security officer is not comfortable with any of these things, you can particularly blacklist type of a file or whatever else which you don't want to share with us. Indeed, what it will mean, you might have a set of rules which are not applicable to you, but that's still kind of a fair compromise. So another question which gets asked, how long we store the data? We usually try to store, well, no, we don't usually. We need, whenever we get a new metadata captured from a system, we want to compare it to the previous state. So meaning when system uploads a new metadata, we need a previous state. So which means typically default for Insights send us information every 24 hours. So that's how long we would keep information about your system. You can configure it to speed longer, but if in 2 weeks we are not getting a new metadata snapshot, we will remove the data from our system. So it's basically from 24 hours to 2 weeks maximum. That's how long we store the data about your system. Okay? That's it on Insights. How much time we still have? 5 minutes. So it's time for taking a question. I think the gentleman at the end was the first one.
Okay. First of all, is Insight available now?
Yes. So it's available from a 6. So it's not available for RHEL 5. You need a 610 minimum. So it's a 610, RHEL 7, and RHEL 8.
And do I need to pay any extra license for it?
No, that's what I said.
Now, completely free.
If you have a RHEL subscription,
yeah.
For older versions of RHEL, you might have to explicitly enable it So look on our customer portal for information. But by default, it should be available. So you should just say, like as I showed you how I install it, where is it? YAML install Insights client. If it's not available, look at the customer portal. But it's every active RHEL subscription, regardless when it was bought, has now access to Insights.
So I have to register. Why do I have to register again?
Because so you need account at the cloudredhat.com minimum, right? Where is it? So you want to see your system here at your portal, right? So when basically that's purpose of registering is basically attaching particular system to a particular account, so we know who can see it.
Okay. I mean, already if I see my servers and I see what kind of sort of problems it has got, the security and all that kind of problem anyway, don't I?
Where do you see? Yeah. Well, you will see outstanding errata. This is
right,
what by
yes.
default you see.
Yes.
This is not outstanding errata. This is actually assessment in case of errata. If it's a CVE, you see much more than you would see otherwise, because you see what's the likelihood of that issue hitting you and what's a risk associated with this, and what's basically risk associated with changing it. You don't see it otherwise.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. There was another one. Sorry, I'm not good with repeating questions, so that's why.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any on-premises deployment of this cloud errata? Insight, instead of connecting all the clients to a cloud.redhat.com? Is there any on-premises deployment where we can, in the restricted network environment?
So the amount of infrastructure which you need to have the system running is so big that basically right now we are not really looking on inside. But remember, I talked about artificial intelligence, I talked about big data, so that all things which basically right now living as a service managed by Red Hat. So we know we see sometimes that request, but right now we don't see feasibly on how to do it on-prem because it's quite big infrastructure.
Okay. And just an alternate, is there any alternate option where instead of connecting each and every individual server to a cloud.redhat, is there any mediator called gateway where via gateway can connect each and every server instead of opening all the servers to a...
That's a great question. Thank you very much, because that's exactly what I forgot maybe to mention. So satellite is another way. So if you have a satellite, you can see the insights data from satellite, and you can use a satellite to route, kind of, to be a broker between your insights client and kind of the core service which is running at our premises. So if you use a smart management with satellite, you can use a satellite as a proxy, and you would see the same thing inside your satellite UI.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hello. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
When you actually showed the slide that Insight assess the risk as low, medium, exactly how does it do it?
Which one?
Yeah, risk of change specifically.
A risk of a change?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, in some cases, it might be skyrocket science. Sometimes it's just assessment of, like, let's say, it's a kernel version change, right? So you need to update the kernel. We're usually very, very good at making sure that ABI and API stay the same. So that would indicate a low impact. There might be some other part of operating system which amount of changes is much bigger, so its risk of a change might be different.
Okay. And the second one is with the security.
Yes.
Can we block the whole file system or a directory instead of specific files? blacklist. So if you remember that you mentioned that we can actually blacklist specific files which can be transmitted to Insight server.
So you can you rephrase it? So I didn't get the question.
So you mentioned that we can actually blacklist specific files
Yeah.
which actually get transmitted to the Insight server.
Yes.
So can we actually blacklist a whole subdirectory itself or a file system? Specifically application or a data file systems, which
So, you get a list of data points, I think right now it's around 50, if I'm not mistaken, which we collect. You can disable any particular data point. I don't think you can disable particular strings. So let's take a varlog messages. You have an option to say, I don't want to share anything from varlog messages, or I share varlog messages. So that's kind of a thing. We don't collect any directories. We actually have a well-defined data points which we collect exactly because of possible concerns with the security officers.
And last one, is there any issues with the GDPR? Like, are these servers where actually the data is collected in the same zone or same region?
Right now, I guess you are asking about how secure Red Hat infrastructure. No.
Other than security is more about GDPR, like
GDPR.
where the data
we
is
are
stored.
100% GDPR conformant with Insight because GDPR is not really relevant here because we don't collect any customer data there, right? So that's no problems with GDPR. I am in Europe, so I know how painful it can be. Yeah.
All right, we'll time out on this one.
One last question, I guess. We are timing out.
Hi, sorry, just to carry on that same question, can you ask Red Hat to store the data that you store for that 2 weeks period in a particular region?
Not yet. So we are looking on like some of our cloud services from our partners to have let's say European and so on, but we are not there yet. Okay. So we are exploring that. Okay. Do we have? No. All right. So there will be a Q&A session and I believe some drinks. So although I won't be there, Adrian is here and hopefully he's able to answer it. Otherwise, we will take it and answer any basically outstanding questions. With this, thank you very much.